It was 11 at night when I heard the knock on my door. I was not expecting anyone, so the sound made my heart jump. When I opened it, my twin brother Marcus stood there, and I almost did not recognize him. His face was covered in bruises, dark purple spreading across his cheekbone. His lip was split open, still bleeding slightly. He held his side like something inside was broken. The sight of him hit me like a punch to the gut. Marcus looked at me with eyes full of pain and exhaustion, and he said 5 words that changed everything. "I cannot do this anymore, Troy." I pulled him inside immediately, my hands shaking with a mix of fear and rage. Marcus and I had been inseparable since birth, protecting each other through every challenge life threw at us. Someone had hurt my brother, and I needed to know who. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to know where you are watching this from. Drop your city in the comments below. And if you have ever had to stand up for someone you love, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story is about to get real. Let me take you back to that night and show you exactly how far I was willing to go to protect my brother. I sat Marcus down on my couch and rushed to get ice bandages and painkillers. His hands trembled as I pressed a bag of frozen peas against his swollen eye. He winced, but did not pull away. I worked carefully cleaning the cut on his lip, wrapping his ribs with an elastic bandage. The whole time, Marcus would not look me in the eye. I could see the shame written all over his face, and it broke my heart. I asked him gently what had happened, keeping my voice calm even though fury was building inside me. Marcus stayed silent for a long time, staring at his hands. Finally, he started talking, and what he told me made my blood run cold. For the past year, 3 men at his construction site had been making his life a living nightmare. Their names were Derek, Kyle, and Brad. Marcus worked as an electrician on a large project in the suburbs, a 5-story office building that was still under construction. Derek was the ringleader, a guy who thought his muscles and his connection to the site manager made him untouchable. Kyle and Brad followed Derek around like loyal dogs, always ready to help him torment whoever he picked as his target. And a year ago, Derek had chosen Marcus. It started small, Marcus explained. They would hide his tools, making him waste time searching for them. They would blame him when something went wrong, even if he had nothing to do with it. Frank, the site supervisor, was a good man, but too busy to notice the small cruelties happening under his nose. Marcus tried to ignore it, thinking it would blow over. But it only got worse. The teasing turned physical. Derek would shove Marcus when no one was looking, a hard push into a wall or a kick to the back of his leg. Kyle and Brad would laugh, egging Derek on. By the 6th month, Derek escalated to actual violence. He cornered Marcus in the parking lot after work one evening and punched him in the stomach hard enough to leave Marcus gasping for air on the ground. I interrupted, asking why Marcus had not told me or reported it to someone. Marcus looked down, his voice barely above a whisper. He said Derek had connections. The site manager was Derek's cousin, and Derek made sure Marcus knew that complaining would mean losing his job. Marcus could not afford that. He had just gone through a messy divorce and was paying child support for his 3-year-old daughter. This job was the only thing keeping him afloat financially. So he endured it, hoping Derek would eventually get bored and move on to someone else. But Derek never got bored. Instead, he found new ways to make Marcus suffer. Every week, there was something. Derek would sabotage Marcus's work, forcing him to redo entire sections of wiring. He would trip Marcus on the scaffolding, nearly causing serious accidents. Kyle and Brad started holding Marcus down while Derek hit him, making sure he could not fight back. Marcus showed up to work each day terrified, never knowing when the next attack would come. He wore long sleeves even in summer to hide the bruises. He made excuses whenever I called, saying he was just tired from work. I'd noticed he seemed off lately, but I never imagined this. Tonight had been the worst, Marcus said. Derek had been in a foul mood all day because Frank had criticized his sloppy work. When everyone else left, Derek took his anger out on Marcus. He punched Marcus in the face repeatedly, then kicked him in the ribs when Marcus fell to the ground. Kyle and Brad held Marcus's arm so he could not protect himself. Marcus thought his ribs might be broken. He finally managed to break free and run to his truck, driving straight to my place because he had nowhere else to go. Listening to all of this, I felt a rage I had never experienced before. My hands clenched into fists so tight my knuckles turned white, but beneath the anger was guilt. How had I not seen this? How had I let my brother suffer alone for an entire year? I remembered phone calls where Marcus sounded exhausted, but he always said he was fine. I remembered times he canceled plans, claiming he was too busy with work. All those moments suddenly made sense, and I hated myself for not pushing harder, for not demanding the truth sooner. Marcus grabbed my arm, his eyes pleading. He begged me not to do anything reckless. He said Derek was dangerous, that confronting him would only make things worse. But I already had an idea forming in my mind. Marcus and I were identical twins. Throughout our lives, people constantly mistook us for each other. Even our own mother sometimes called us by the wrong name. If no one could tell us apart, then maybe I could use that to our advantage. I looked Marcus straight in the eye and said we were switching places. Marcus immediately objected. He said it was too dangerous, that I did not know anything about electrical work, that Derek would see through the deception. But I had already made up my mind. I told Marcus he would teach me the basics over the next few days. I would go to work in his place for 1 week. Just 1 week to show Derek and his friends what happened when they picked on the wrong person. Marcus was too exhausted to argue anymore. Deep down, I think he wanted to believe someone could fix this nightmare for him. He finally nodded, and we started planning. The next 3 days were intense. Marcus became my teacher, drilling me on everything I needed to know to pass as an electrician, at least convincingly enough to fool people who were not looking too closely. We sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by tools, wire strippers, voltage testers, and electrical diagrams. Marcus showed me how to use each tool properly, how to strip wires without damaging them, how to read a circuit breaker panel. He taught me the terminology I would need to know. Words like voltage, amperage, grounding, circuit breaker, and conduit became part of my vocabulary. I memorized the layout of the construction site from the sketches Marcus drew. He pointed out where each person usually worked, where the supply closet was located, where Derek liked to corner him. But learning the technical skills was only half the battle. I also had to learn how to be Marcus. Our personalities were different. I was more outgoing, confident, willing to speak my mind. Marcus was quieter, more reserved, someone who avoided confrontation. For this plan to work, I needed to mimic his mannerisms perfectly. Marcus coached me on how he walked slightly hunched over as if trying to make himself smaller, how he talked soft-spoken and hesitant, how he avoided eye contact, especially with Derek. I practiced in front of a mirror, adjusting my posture, changing the way I held my shoulders. It felt unnatural, but I understood why Marcus had developed these habits. When you are being hunted, you learn to make yourself invisible. Marcus warned me repeatedly about Derek. He said Derek was smart in a cunning way, always careful to abuse Marcus when no one important was watching. If I acted too differently, Derek would suspect something was wrong. I promised to be cautious. My plan for the first few days was simple. Observe. Learn Derek's patterns. Document everything. Then, when the time was right, I would turn the tables. Marcus made me promise not to get myself hurt. I promised, though we both knew I was walking into a dangerous situation. Monday morning arrived faster than I expected. I woke up at 5:30 in the morning, my stomach tight with anticipation. I dressed in Marcus's work clothes, faded jeans with paint stains, a blue cotton shirt, and worn leather boots that were slightly too small for me. I drove Marcus's truck to the construction site, arriving at 6:30 just as the sun was starting to light up the sky. The site was massive, a skeleton of steel beams and concrete floors that would eventually become a modern office building. Workers were already scattered around, carrying materials, operating machinery, shouting instructions to each other over the noise. I checked in with Frank, the site supervisor. He was a broad-shouldered man in his early 50s with gray hair and a weathered face that spoke of decades working outdoors. He barely glanced at me, just nodded and told me to get started on the third-floor wiring. I grabbed my tool belt and headed up, hyper-aware of every person I passed. Then I saw him. Derek. He was exactly as Marcus had described, maybe even more intimidating in person. 6 feet, 2 inches tall, heavily muscled from years of physical labor with a thick beard and cold eyes that seemed to look through people rather than at them. He was 29, but carried himself with the arrogance of someone who had never faced real consequences. Kyle and Brad flanked him like shadows. Kyle was tall and lanky with nervous energy constantly moving. Brad was shorter, but built like a bulldog, compact and solid. They were talking and laughing about something, but their laughter died when they noticed me. Derek's eyes locked onto mine, and I felt the hostility radiating off him. I quickly looked down, remembering to act like Marcus. My heart pounded, but I kept my expression neutral, scared. Derek walked past me, deliberately shoving his shoulder into mine hard enough to make me stumble. "Watch where you are going, Marcus," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Oh, wait, you never do. Never." Kyle and Brad snickered behind him. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from responding, forcing myself to stay in character. I mumbled an apology and walked away, feeling their eyes on my back. Inside, I was already cataloging everything. Derek was a bully who enjoyed his power. He wanted reactions, and I was going to give him exactly what he did not expect. The rest of the day passed in a tense blur. I worked on installing electrical outlets, constantly aware of where Derek and his friends were. Frank moved around the site, checking on various projects, but he was stretched thin, managing dozens of workers. I understood now how Derek had gotten away with this for so long. During the morning break, Derek made a point of sitting near me in the break area, a plywood table set up under a tarp. He talked loudly about how some people on the site were dead weight, how they slowed everyone down, how maybe they should just quit and save everyone the trouble. He never said my name, but it was obvious he was talking about Marcus. Kyle and Brad nodded along, adding their own insults. I sat there silently eating my sandwich, pretending to ignore them while my phone in my shirt pocket recorded every word. By the end of the first day, Derek was testing boundaries. As I walked to Marcus's truck in the parking lot, Derek appeared out of nowhere, blocking my path. Kyle and Brad materialized on either side of him. Derek stepped close, invading my space. "You have been quiet today, Marcus," he said. "That is smart. Keep it that way." I looked at the ground, nodded, and got in the truck without saying a word. Derek watched me drive away, a satisfied smirk on his face. He thought he had broken me just like he had broken Marcus. He had no idea what was coming. Tuesday brought more of the same, but worse. Derek hid my tools while I was on a lunch break, forcing me to spend an hour searching for them. When Frank found out the electrical work was behind schedule, he lectured me in front of everyone. I apologized profusely, playing the role of the incompetent worker Derek had painted Marcus as. But while I apologized, I was watching Derek. I noticed things Marcus had mentioned. Derek cut corners on his own work. He left wires hanging loose instead of securing them, properly ignored safety protocols about wearing harnesses on high platforms, and rushed through tasks that required precision. I took photos with my phone whenever I could do so discreetly. Wednesday escalated further. Kyle spilled an entire cup of coffee on the electrical blueprints I was using. The brown liquid spread across the paper, making the diagrams illegible. "Oops, my bad," Marcus, Brad said with a laugh. "You should have moved faster." I cleaned up the mess without complaint, but inside I was counting down. Derek was getting bolder, which meant he was getting careless. After work on Wednesday, Derek shoved me again, this time hard enough that I nearly fell down a short flight of stairs. He was pushing to see how much I would take before breaking. I could feel his frustration. He wanted a reaction, wanted me to cry or beg or quit. I gave him nothing but quiet submission, and it was driving him crazy. That night I met with Marcus. I showed him the recordings, the photos, the notes I had been taking. Marcus listened, his face a mixture of anger and sadness as he heard Derek's voice threatening him all over again. I told Marcus my plan for Thursday. I was going to give Derek what he wanted, a confrontation, but on my terms, in a place where I could control the situation. Marcus was scared, but he trusted me. We went over the plan 3 times to make sure nothing could go wrong. By the time Marcus left, I was ready. Thursday morning, I arrived at the site with a sense of calm purpose. Everything was in motion now. I had spent 3 days gathering evidence, 3 days learning Derek's patterns, 3 days earning his overconfidence. Today, I would show him what happened when you pushed the wrong person too far. I went straight to the 3rd floor, knowing it would be empty for most of the morning. The 3rd floor was still just concrete and steel beams with construction materials scattered around and a large crane visible through the open walls. It was isolated exactly what I needed. I worked on installing conduit for electrical wiring, bending the metal pipes, and securing them to the walls. I knew Derek would come looking for me eventually. Bullies always sought out their victims when no one else was around. Sure enough, about an hour into my work, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Derek emerged first, followed by Kyle and Brad. They spread out slightly a formation they had probably used dozens of times to corner Marcus. "Well, well, well," Derek said, his voice echoing in the empty space. "Look, who is working alone? You know what happens when you are alone, Marcus." Kyle moved to block the stairway exit. Brad positioned himself near the other side. They had done this before trapping Marcus so he could not run. I stayed crouched by the wall, apparently focused on my work. "Please, Derek," I said, my voice shaking just like Marcus would sound. "I just want to finish my work." Derek laughed a harsh sound without any real humor. He walked closer, his boots heavy on the concrete. "You think you can just show up here every day and make me look bad? Frank has been asking why the electrical work is behind schedule. Guess who he blames? Me. Because you are too stupid to do your job right." Derek reached down and grabbed the front of my shirt, hauling me to my feet. His face was inches from mine, and I could smell coffee on his breath. "I am tired of you, Marcus," he said. "Maybe I need to hit you hard enough this time that you do not come back." He pulled his fist back, and this is where everything changed. His fist came toward my face, but instead of flinching, I caught his wrist mid-swing. Derek's eyes widened in shock. Marcus had never fought back, never even tried to block a punch. I tightened my grip on his wrist and looked him straight in the eye, dropping the scared act completely. "Here is the thing. Derek," I said in my own voice, not Marcus's soft tone. "I am not Marcus." Derek tried to pull his arm free, but I held firm. "What are you talking about?" he demanded, confusion mixing with the first hint of fear in his expression. "I am Troy," I said calmly. "Marcus is my twin brother, and for the past 3 days I've been watching everything you do." I shoved Derek backward and he stumbled, catching himself against a support beam. Kyle and Brad looked at each other uncertainly. They had not expected this. Kyle recovered first and rushed at me. I had been preparing for this. I had trained in self-defense for 10 years, starting in college and continuing ever since. When Kyle lunged, I sidestepped and used his own momentum to send him sprawling onto the concrete. Brad came next, trying to grab me from behind. I dropped my weight, twisted, and threw him over my hip. He landed hard, the wind knocked out of him. Derek watched this, his face transitioning from shock to rage. "You think you are tough," he shouted. "I have been dealing with Marcus for a year. You are just another version of him." "No, Derek," I said, standing relaxed but ready. "I am the version that fights back." Derek charged at me like an angry bull. He threw a wild punch and I blocked it, countering with a controlled strike to his solar plexus. Not enough to seriously hurt him, but enough to stop his momentum. Derek gasped, bent over. I could have continued, could have really hurt him, but that was not the point. I pushed him against the wall and held him there, my forearm across his chest. "You have been beating my brother for a year, because he was too scared to lose his job," I said, my voice low and hard. "But I do not work here, Derek. I do not have anything to lose." I pulled out my phone with my free hand and played one of the recordings from the past 3 days. Derek's voice filled the space, clear and unmistakable. He was threatening Marcus, laughing about hurting him, admitting to sabotaging his work. Derek's face went pale as he listened to his own words played back to him. "You recorded me," he whispered, Every word I confirmed, every threat, every time you put your hands on my brother. And you know what else I found? I showed him the photos on my phone, swiping through images of loose wires missing safety equipment code violations Derek was responsible for. You have been cutting corners on electrical work, I said. Those loose wires on the second floor, that is a safety violation. The missing ground wires in the main panel that could kill someone. I have documented everything. Photos, videos, recordings. I could send this to Frank right now. Or I could send it to OSHA. Or both. Derek's face had gone from pale to gray. He understood the magnitude of what I held in my hand. His job, his reputation, possibly his freedom, all of it was in jeopardy. Kyle and Brad had gotten to their feet but made no move to help Derek. They stood frozen, realizing they too were implicated in the recordings. "What do you want?" Derek asked, his voice barely audible. "I want you to leave my brother alone," I said, "forever. If I hear that you even look at Marcus the wrong way, all of this goes public. You will lose your job, maybe face charges for assault. Do you understand?" Derek nodded, slowly defeated. But our conversation was interrupted by another voice. Derek, Kyle, Brad, Frank's voice boomed from the stairway. "My office. Now." We all turned to see Frank standing there, his face set in a hard expression. He had heard everything. The truth was, I had contacted Frank the day before, sending him a portion of the evidence and asking him to be present this morning. Frank had been skeptical at first, but the recordings convinced him. He had stayed out of sight, watching and listening, wanting to see the truth for himself before taking action. Now he had seen enough. Derek opened his mouth to speak, but Frank held up his hand. "I do not want to hear it," Frank said. "I have been running construction sites for 30 years, and I will not tolerate this. You three are done. Pack your things." Derek looked like he wanted to argue, but the fight had gone out of him. He walked past Frank toward the stairs, Kyle and Brad following silently behind. Frank watched them go, then turned to me. "I am sorry about your brother," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I should have noticed sooner. Just make sure this never happens to anyone else," I replied. Frank nodded. "I plan to. We are implementing new policies, more oversight, a confidential reporting system. This will not happen again on my watch." I drove home that afternoon with a weight lifted off my shoulders. Marcus was waiting when I walked through the door, his eyes searching my face anxiously. "What happened?" he asked. "Are you okay?" I smiled, the first genuine smile in days. "It is done," I said. "Derek, Kyle, and Brad are gone. Frank fired them." Marcus did not move for a moment, as if he could not process what I had just said. Then his eyes filled with tears, and he pulled me into a tight hug. "I do not know what to say," he whispered against my shoulder. "Thank you does not seem like enough." "You are my brother," I told him. "I would do it 1,000 times over." We sat down, and I told him everything that had happened. The confrontation, the evidence I had collected, how Derek had crumbled when faced with consequences, Frank's decision to terminate all 3 men immediately. Marcus listened occasionally, wiping his eyes. For the first time in a year, I saw relief in his expression. The constant fear that had haunted him was finally gone. He asked what would happen next, whether Derek might retaliate. I explained that Frank had made it clear any retaliation would result in legal action, and I still had all the evidence safely stored in multiple locations. Derek was not stupid enough to make his situation worse. The following weeks brought gradual healing. Marcus returned to work the next Monday, but to a different environment. Frank had reorganized the teams, and Marcus was now working with a group of older, more professional contractors who welcomed him warmly. Frank also implemented the changes he had promised, creating a zero-tolerance policy for bullying and harassment with regular check-ins and an anonymous reporting system. Word had spread about what happened to Derek, and it sent a clear message to everyone on site. That behavior would not be tolerated anymore. Marcus slowly regained his confidence. The first few days back he was nervous, constantly looking over his shoulder. But as time passed and no threats materialized, he began to relax. He started smiling again, something I had not seen him do genuinely in months. We made it a point to have dinner together every week just to stay connected. Marcus brought his daughter a few times, a bright-eyed little girl who called me her hero uncle, though she was too young to really understand what had happened. It made me emotional every time. As for Derek, I heard through mutual contacts that he struggled to find work in construction after word got around about why he was fired. Kyle and Brad reached out to Marcus via email a few weeks later, both apologizing and admitting they had been wrong to follow Derek's lead. Marcus never responded, but he told me knowing they felt remorse gave him some closure. He did not need their apologies to move forward, but it helped to know they recognized their actions were wrong. Through all of this, I learned profound lessons about suffering and silence. Marcus had endured not just physical pain but emotional torture every single day for a year. He woke up each morning knowing he would face cruelty, yet he forced himself to go because he had responsibilities, people, depending on him. How many others are out there right now? I wondered, trapped in similar situations. People who stay silent because they fear losing their livelihoods because they do not think anyone will believe them, because the system is rigged against them. Marcus had been lucky in a sense. He had someone willing to fight for him. Not everyone has that. I also learned that violence is not always the answer, but standing up certainly is. I did not have to seriously hurt Derek to win. What defeated him was truth and evidence. The recordings, the photos, the documentation of his wrongdoing, those were more powerful than any punch I could have thrown. Derek had operated in shadows, counting on his victims being too afraid to speak up. Once the light was shown on his actions, he crumbled. That taught me something valuable. Bullies rely on secrecy and fear. Take those away, and they have nothing. Marcus made me promise that if anything like this ever happened again, he would tell me immediately. No more suffering in silence, no more trying to handle everything alone. I made him promise in return to check in regularly to be honest about how he was feeling. We both understood that family means being there for each other, especially during the hardest times. I wish Marcus had come to me sooner, but I also understood why he had not. Shame is a powerful thing. It makes people feel like their struggles are their own fault, that asking for help is admitting weakness. But there is no weakness in reaching out when you are drowning. Sometimes the people we love carry burdens we cannot see. Marcus smiled every time we talked on the phone during that year, but behind that smile was a year of pain. I learned that being family means more than just blood. It means showing up when someone needs you, even if it means taking their place in the fight. Derek thought he could break my brother, but what he did not know was that Marcus was not alone. He never was. And when Derek pushed Marcus to his breaking point, he unknowingly invited me into the equation. That was his biggest mistake. If someone you love is suffering in silence, reach out. Ask the hard questions. Do not accept surface-level answers if your instincts tell you something is wrong. And if they need you to fight for them, do not hesitate. Because at the end of the day, family is not just about being there for the good times. It is about being there when everything falls apart. It is about switching places when your brother cannot stand anymore. It is about making sure that the people who hurt the ones you love understand there will be consequences. Looking back now, months later, I do not regret a single decision I made. Would I do it again? Absolutely. Would I do anything differently? Maybe I would have encouraged Marcus to speak up sooner, created an environment where he felt safe telling me the truth before it got so bad. But I cannot change the past. All I can do is make sure Marcus knows he is not alone moving forward and hope that sharing this story helps someone else who might be going through something similar. You are not alone. There are people who will fight for you. Sometimes you just have to let them know you need help. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to stand up for someone who could not stand up for themselves? What would you have done in my situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because I read every single one. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about family courage and standing up for what is right. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, when someone messes with your family, sometimes you have to show them exactly what happens when they cross that line. Take care of each other out there and never underestimate the power of standing together. Until next time.